Log 35. I am recording this on the 21st of June, and it's the end of my working week, and I'm reflecting on how the working week has progressed. So, the plan for this week was that I would finish section number 4 and move on to section number 6 and 7. But in section 4, there were two objects that I knew from beforehand that they were going to be challenging. The challenge is the scale, given that I'm adding a lot of detail to a small and very secluded and sort of detailed, but at the same time, all the detail has to be implied rather than visibly being shown, given that you cannot put the amount of detail that that it's needed in such a small scale. So this week I tackled that Monday and Tuesday until Wednesday. It went surprisingly well. I didn't find any difficulties per se, and I was very happy. I felt confident and that the effort that I've placed beforehand and in my previous designs has paid off, and I was able to confidently and very methodically move forward without having to think a lot. So I finished the major difficulties in section 4 on Wednesday and had Thursday and Friday to move on to section 6 and 7. Now, I measured all section 6 and 7. Well, parts of section 7 haven't been fully measured, but I decided this time around I would put all the lines down, all the measurements down, meaning all the outlines and what's happening in that section without having to shadow it and add the values and define it through pencil marks and blending. So I did. I completed section 6 in terms of what's happening in it, but I haven't really finished the amount of shadows and textures that needs to be done. So I'm sort of like halfway through section 6 and I haven't even started section 7, but I know all the measurements to do so when I'm ready. So the idea is that this week that is coming, which is going to be sort of my last week before my 4-day break, it's going to be focusing on finishing section 6 and 7, and ideally either during my break or just before it, measure section 8, 9, and 10, which are the remaining sections, so I can have an easier time when I come back. I have to say this design has been very interesting for my brain. I think it's quite different in terms of how I approach it, and given that I have so much history in creating compositions of this nature now, given that this is my 6th one, I'm not really too worried on the design anymore. I'm just going with it and trying to finish it. Today, for example, I was working on section 6. Yesterday I did the line work, and today was the shadowing and texture and the values and the blending and all that. So I started doing that, and then given that it's close to section 4, I was blending the shadows from the figures that I created in section 4 and the things in the objects that were around it, so I can sort of glue these two sections together and start seeing them as one. As I was doing that, in one of the objects, I sort of smeared a little bit on its face, like the graphite, and I tried to erase that. And given that it's such a small scale, I even sharpen my eraser. I take my cutter and I make a pointy edge and I carve it so that I can be as precise as I can. And I sort of, quote unquote, at that time felt that I ruined it, and I started working on it profusely and trying to get what I was sort of thinking that should be the case with the nose and the mouth and the expression was mainly the mouth and the nose. The eye didn't even, given that it's a profile and it didn't really got smudged. So I was trying to do that. I found it a bit difficult at first, and sort of started feeling bad about it, about me not settling, me not ruining things. And the terrible thing about this is that when I create something, I don't take any pictures. I don't have any recordings of it. If this was flow, for example, and I was painting the face, given that everything is streamed and you have a live video going on, and when that finishes, you have past broadcasts that you can witness and see. Okay, yesterday's face, I think in my brain is nice, but I have to compare it to today's sort of endeavor that I changed it and see like, oh yeah, today's face is actually much better than yesterday's. But there's this thing in our brain and a part of our memory that when we think about the past, there is no limit on how beautiful or amazing it could have been, and it was, even though it's 100% inaccurate, because we always daydream about our past. Oh, look at the thing that happened. It was great. It was the best. But given that it already passed, you can't really see it. You can't really tangibly say if what you're thinking is in a realm of reality or your own fantasy. So given that I didn't have that recording, I didn't have a picture of what I was doing before, I was thinking in my brain, oh, before it was such a nice and pretty face. Why did I ruin it? And then I was going down that slope of trying to fix it. And then I just stopped myself. I said, hey, look, we're not going to do this. And I took a step back. I saw what it was bothering me subjectively and what this phase needed to be complete. And I just went for it. I went and fixed it, and I settled with what it was. I still like it, obviously. I'm happy with the result, and if I wasn't happy, I was gonna be on top of it. But it sort of reminded me again that when you like something, you don't have to feel like you so possessed by it. Meaning that if I was seeing the face, and for whatever reason, whatever circumstance, I feel like it wasn't enough, I should be able to pursue it without having to think about the past of, oh, how great it was or whatever. It's irrelevant given that what we're dealing with right now in this instant, at this moment, the face is not working out and I need to fix it. I don't have to try what I did before and sort of trying to capture that. And as soon as I realized that, the idea that let's not try and do what I did before that I can't really remember. Let's just see what this objectively needs and what the emotion that I want this face to have, or the shape of the nose or the mouth, and do it. And once I did that, it made sense, and I I felt confident about it. I felt confident with that sort of approach. So in regards to that, I decided to go on the first object that I designed in this composition, where it was in section 1 and 2, sort of overlapping the two. And I decided, let's look at this face. Let's look at what's going on here, because I always felt like could be better, but let's leave it for now. And I started fixing it. It wasn't a drastic change, but it was something that I would say, okay, this looks much better. And it's a lesson that I learned, and I wanted to touch upon on this log, that the past always looks amazing when we look back to it. And I'm talking more subjectively on something physical and something visual. And even if it's a negative or a positive of what happens in the past or what happened or what we think was happening or not, we always amplify the emotion that we want to or we think was happening at that moment. So if I was feeling joy when I was creating that face, and at the end I was like, "Damn, look at that, good job," I was pampering myself and saying all these positive affirmations, and then something goes wrong, and I'm trying to fix it, and then I remember back to it, and I'm like, "Oh my god, I was saying all these good things, I was saying all that," and I sort of get stuck in that facade because our mind will make a reality that doesn't exist, and already it passed anyways. So trying to stay with what we have now and what is happening in the design, what is happening in the situation, and what subjectively needs to happen to make this work is something that I'm consciously trying to like get better at. And this was sort of like my second introduction to this lesson, given that my first introduction was on my first ever design of these compositions, where I was trying to fix the face. I liked the face in the beginning, but it was like in a percentage of what it could have been, it was like 30%. Visually, it was nice, but I wanted to take that as extra step, and I tried doing that. And long story short, as I've said in one of the first 10 logs, I think it was like log 7, maybe 4 or 5, can't remember. I had a terrible time with the paper. I ended up ripping it apart, not by choice, but as I was erasing sort of like my graphite markings, I unwillingly sort of teared the paper as I was creating friction with the eraser and all that, and I sort of lost it. I was like 80% into the design in that specific composition, and I had like 20% left until I finished it. And I felt so broken. I felt like, what's going on? And I stayed up all night trying to figure things out, and I couldn't. I was always saying how great the face was before, how great this, always thinking about the past being amazing. And then I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go and sleep. I'm done. It was like 4 a.m. or 3, somewhere there. It was ridiculous. And I slept, and the next morning I figured my solution, and my solution was to start over again, just for the face, and cut the face, sort of the shape of the face, and stick it on top of it. And given that it's a statue and it's a broken statue, the roughness and the change of sort of depth, even though in a two-dimensional sort of design, it won't really matter, it won't really show. Um, the imperfection of it makes sense, and it made sense for the story, and I found this new storytelling ability that I was able to introduce by mistakes. And now this was my second one when I knew the face was okay, but I wanted to I wanted to make it better. And given that I smudged it, I was like, let's try it, and I had this effect. So it was very interesting. It was a very fascinating an hour. I think it was an hour that took me sort of like this escalation versus having to do this all night. I even though towards the end of me figuring out the current problem and my current sort of obsession, I even had like my paper next ready if I wanted to redo this phase, because I knew, like, that's an option. So I guess that really allowed me to feel much more confident and sort of like, let's just see, let's just like go with it. And if I, for whatever reason, feel that this is not working, let's redo it. But I didn't. I said I don't want to use that. Let's figure it out, because the paper wasn't giving out on me, and I don't know if you ever experienced that when I say the paper giving out on you. I mean, obviously when it tears, it tears, but if you were to design something or do any lines on a blank white paper, and you erase it, maybe the first time it's going to erase quite nicely, given that you didn't put a lot of pressure. But as you finalize this shape or the thing that you're doing, the paper sort of gets its sort of etching of the outline, and it smudges the whiteness. So when I wanted to add the light, I couldn't, given that it's already smudged, it's already dulled out. So there's different stages that if you keep doing it, it sort of reduces the purity of your lights, it reduces the purity of your lines. So you have to compromise and okay, I'm pushing it forward and I'm keep changing my mind. So I am reducing this pureness, which is a choice, obviously. And I'd say it's even more difficult when you're dealing with smaller scale designs, given that half an inch or half a centimeter, um, any line that you will put, they're very close together. So let's say you would define the nose and the mouth. The in between is it's really really small. We're talking about 0.1 or 0.05 cm of a distance. So let's say I wanted to erase the nose, like the bottom part, and add some shadows, and then I want light underneath that because the light is sort of hitting on the top part of your lip and all that. It's very difficult to do if you smudge and keep smudging the the paper, given that the space doesn't allow for it to come forward and only the light allows for that effect, that sort of cleanness and realism to come forward forth. I should have said fourth, but I said fourth anyways. And regardless, that's why when I was sort of working on the nose and the mouth, I realized that that was happening, so I erased all of it, so I could sort of clean my lines together and do it again, just the nose and the mouth of the figure, and it worked nicely. I was able to save it, and it was a happy ending to this sort of slightly alarmed raised moment. But regardless of the design and what's gonna happen physically with the design, I'm pretty happy with how everything is going. I'm gonna be sort of a bit a bit late in when I finish it, given that I'm gonna take a break on the 28th until the next Wednesday, which I think that's in July, 3rd of July. Somewhere there, that's what I'm thinking, or at least around that week, sort of half relax, half do some measurements and not really draw. And the week after that, that will be the 8th of July until the 19th of July, which is the next Friday after that. I think that will be the ending of the design. So it's gonna be, I've started the design on the 4th of June, and if I finish it on the 19th of July, it's like a month and a month and some weeks, which is it's not really an issue. Like if I take more time, it means I needed it, but it's just to keep me in perspective on when the deadline that I wanted to initially sort of aim for, and I'm still aiming for that, but I'm not forcing myself. And there is a thing that I have to do after this design is finished, after the composition number 6 is done. It is the perfect amount of opportunity for me to sit down and reflect. Well, it's not just the what is gonna happen ahead, but more of what needs to be done that I was sort of putting on the side as I was designing these 6 compositions. And I did it when I did some of it on number 3 in this composition. When I finished number 3 and I was halfway through, I did some of my my to-do list. And now when I finish this design on number 6, I need to do that again. And primarily I need to re-advertise my Flow painting catalog so I can get there another chance to sell the remaining paintings that I have. And I was thinking of ways to do that, and I don't want it just to be another reused sort of method that I did last year and just bring it forth again, but I wanted to give more meaning and more backstory in what I was doing. So I was thinking about ways of doing that, and ways of me giving more information for people who are gonna see it again, that they already saw it, and have a couple of solid ideas. And I'm gonna do that. I think it's gonna take 2 weeks for me to finish it. The reintroduction of the paintings and having that rolling through the summer, and seeing if I can generate some income so I can keep moving forward and plan some trips for the second arc. And yeah, that's gonna be my sort of pause from the stonemason, cleaning up some of the things off my plate, my metaphorical plate, and then moving back into the stonemason again, hopefully in the beginning of August, and focusing on the final three main designs that are defined for chapter 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, which I have been, as you have seen, been working mainly on chapter 3 as of now, given that chapter 3 had the most visually uh, difficult and biggest arsenal of drawings that needed to be done. So yeah, that's my mindset on that aspect, and I'm trying to keep on there, keep my mind fixated on finishing this composition, but it's been a bit hard, and that's why the break, it's gonna help me sort of recalibrate and sort of ground myself again before I finish this and move forward. As the pattern, as I said on the previous log, is sort of exhausting me, and I want to sort of start looking around a little bit, because metaphorically, the way that I see it in my brain is that when I fixate my head to draw, I look down a lot, right? I Yes, I can turn it around to see different angles on the design, but then I need to disconnect and go outside and see what I've been feeling and what I've been creating with those feelings, see it being applied and referenced in the real world. And what I mean by that is that when you create something and you go back to the world and see and have that in your mind and see something that resembles it, or the emotions or the feeling, you begin to sort of reevaluate how close you came to reality. Because obviously, we're all depicting and living our own realities. But when it comes to becoming an overlapping theme and wanting to introduce it to others, having a common ground allows for their venture, or their venturing into this sort of personalized reality, to be safeguarded. Like, imagine if you're in space, and when they trying to get out of the ship and explore or fix a part of their ship that is like on the opposite end, and they have to physically get out of the spacecraft, sorry, and be in space to go and fix that. They have to strap themselves, sort of a lifeline that won't allow them to just stray off and wander off with their trajectory unknown, really. So I see it in the same way. The reality that I'm creating and that I'm going to be introducing to you, if I didn't have any commonalities, you will feel that you're just floating and drifting away in whatever is happening. And it wouldn't be an interesting experience. It will be an alarming one that you cannot relate. You feel like you want to get grounded as soon as possible. You want a bit of safety. And that can be applied in some sections. But the way that I want to do it is, I want you to have that lifeline and you getting strapped on that and venturing. And at some point, towards the end of it, you realize that strap that you just fastened yourself with wasn't attached to anything. It was the facade of you feeling that you're secured. That's how I visualize it, and I hope my explaining of that visualization came out well. And it's all about storytelling. It's all about how you introduce something and what you leave after or before or and all of that. And it's a joy for me, but at the same time, it's something that I have to be cautious, given that I'm not doing this just for myself. I'm doing this to make a point and introduce this importance of emotions and perspectives that rarely is sort of talked upon or rarely is showcased in the way that I feel it needs to be showcased. Um, um, I feel it's I feel it's worth it, and that's why me thinking how it's going to be experienced is a priority. Yeah, that's my mindset and sort of ideas that I had for this week. And hopefully next week I can be close to finishing section number 7 and already in the beginning of section number 8 and moving forward, or at least having the measurements. That will be my point. And even though I'm going to be having my break for the next few days after the next week, I'm going to still make a log. I'm going to still voice what I was feeling and what I was doing to add a lot of context on if something is going to change or if something is going to take a different turn to elaborate on that. But thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week or wherever you wish to tune in.